Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
From sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be.
Welcome to this episode of Recover You. How are you, Kylene?
Good, Patrick.
I'm the one with energy today.
Yes.
Yes. So
Excellent job on the intro.
If we go 48 minutes and it's just me talking, then you know that Kylene has nodded off to sleep. So we will try to bring her back in at some point through this podcast. Is that true, Kylene?
I will not nod off. I will be here.
Yeah. Okay.
But my brain may not be firing as quickly as it normally does.
Yes. Now, why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is?
Yeah. Why do you think your brain is a little slow today?
Because
I'm not calling you slow, by the way. I'm just saying your brain processing speed might be a little slow.
Because I've allowed myself to be stressed.
Why are you stressed?
Because I have an audition tomorrow.
Or
a show, The King and I.
The King and I. There you go.
And so it's been a really long time since I've auditioned or performed, put myself out there, done anything, saying, hey, here's my voice, judge it, please love me, please accept me. And I, over the past, after everything happened, I got really, 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 really bad stage fright. So for the past couple of years, I've been really trying to heal and process through and work on my stage fright. And it got so bad that like singing, hymns at church was hard sometimes. Yeah. So I have been taking lessons again for a while. I've been really kind of building up my self-confidence in that area. And finally I saw this audition that's like perfect. Like I would love to do 2 parts in the show. Yeah. And so I was like, well, I'm going to put myself out there. But what I'm trying to tell myself is that it's a win-win. If I get it, that would be awesome. If I don't, I'm just proud of myself for pushing myself to do it. And I went to my lesson on Friday and I had a song that I felt really comfortable with from the show. And my teacher picked a harder song from the show.
Now, why do you think she picked a harder song?
Well, it's more my voice type. It's
and she knows you can do it.
She knows I can do it.
Yeah.
Yes, but that was a little because I had been practicing, for several days.
You were singing the musical version of Duck, Duck, Goose.
And so now I have less time. I've really been focusing and practicing on the second piece, and it's harder. So it kind of throws me back into the.
Well, I'll just tell you today, you sang at church and everybody was like amazed and people were coming up to me like, man, what's she singing for? And everything like that. So I think you're going to be fine.
Thank you.
Yep. There's nothing. What's on the other side of fear?
Like what's opposite to it, or like when I get
what's on the other side
audition experience?
Yeah, I heard this one time and I thought it was really good. And I used to talk to Keegan about this when he would like have to audition or maybe even ask a girl out or something like that. Like what's on the other side of fear?
Peace.
Nothing.
Nothing's
on the other side of fear, right? You get afraid and then the event happens and you go, oh.
Well, I do have, historically, if I look back on my life, much more anticipatory anxiety, like leading up to stuff. And then you do it and you're like, oh, it's not that bad. Yeah. That's kind of what you're saying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, so I allowed my nervous system to be a little stressed. Kind of, I was going to sing in front of people today to kind of ask them to help me practice.
Big stuff too.
Yes. And so they did. They listened and let me kind of practice my 60-second piece, and it was very nice of them. And they were very kind and complimentary. And so hopefully that was my little dress rehearsal before the audition tomorrow. Yeah. So hopefully I can relax a little bit. And but anyway, it's a long answer to your question. So
yeah. Well, good deal. Okay. So today's topic is when to fight and when to let go.
Or when to let go, yeah.
Yeah, and what are we specifically referring to?
Yeah, she's on the spot today. Today is Ask Kylene questions on the podcast to keep me alert and going.
Keep you from nodding off.
Yeah. Yeah, so we thought we would talk about, I get a lot of people reaching out or clients, and one of the biggest struggle in the area after betrayal is like, how do I know my marriage is worth fighting for? Or, it's really scary, the idea of like even giving someone the opportunity to reconcile after they've hurt you so badly. And so I get this question in some form or another from a lot of people regularly. That's basically like, how do you know? How do you know when to stick it out? How do you know when to let it go? And in some sense, I want to say I'm thankful for the past experience that I have of being both divorced and reconciled, married and divorced and married and reconciled, because I guess, I've done both, and so I guess that's a little bit of a different perspective than if I had just gone through this with you and it was the only experience I had, in something like that. So we thought we would talk about some of our thoughts. Now, I do want to clarify just specifically with this. So as a coach, when I'm working with a client, it's not necessarily always going to be me giving an opinion, right? Like as a coach, like I have to help you accomplish your goals within your value system, and sometimes help you think through like what's healthy for you, what you can tolerate, that sort of thing. So taking that into context and coming into the podcast context, this is going to be Patrick and me sharing our opinions, right? These are broad spectrum opinions. And so within that, we realize that there are a lot of nuanced factors. There are a lot of unique situations. So of course we want to be sensitive to that. So as you're listening, just realize if some of this doesn't fit with you, that's okay. And if you disagree with it, that's also okay. And we're just going to give some like broad brushstroke ideas. And again, the idea that we're always going to push for is what's healthy.
Right.
Like what's actually healthy. We don't want anyone living in a long-term toxic, abusive, struggling with your nervous system, struggling with your mental health, struggling with your physical health, right? We want you to be able to live a healed, recovered, fulfilled life on both sides. We want the addict to live a happy life. We want the betrayed partner to live a happy life. And being through the reconciliation process, Patrick and I know like it's not butterflies and roses. Like it's freaking hard. It's really hard. And you have this idea sometimes, I think, of like, oh, I'm committing to reconciliation and we're going to get through some really hard things and then it's going to be easy. And it's not. Like there are really beautiful moments. And we've talked about some of those moments on this podcast. We've talked about the hard moments on this podcast. We've talked about the hurdles we've overcome. We've talked about the triggers and the fears. And so, the reality is if you go that route, it is also very hard. And so neither choice is easy. And neither choice is like, yay, like I'm getting divorced, or yay, I'm reconciling, right? So we just want to kind of, just introducing the idea here. We realize there's like a million different variations on a theme when it comes to these relationships. And so if you are working with a coach, just know like we're going to be working with you as an individual, but this episode's going to be just sort of like broad brushstrokes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. You want to start with when to fight?
Sure. Let's go with when to fight. And what that means is not fight physically. What that means
with
is
each other. When to fight for your marriage.
Yeah. When are you going to fight for your relationship? And
yeah,
when are you going to really kind of, what are some good signs that can tell you that it's probably appropriate to keep fighting for it?
Yeah. So I had a couple things written down here, and you guys have always heard me say on all of the platforms that I have, whenever I'm talking about why I stayed, with Patrick, is one of the things is that we had a foundation of friendship, right? And I was kind of like, hey, if we can have a really good relationship without this horrible thing, then maybe it can be worth sticking around for, right? But I didn't know if that was possible in the beginning. So when I kind of zoom out, I wrote 4 things down that I thought of when we were talking about this. So one is the basis of safety. The second one is personal connection. The third is social or familial stability. And the fourth is that there are 2 people willing to engage in the work it takes. So I kind of want to break each one of those down. So we talk about safety a lot. And to be fair and to be really, really honest, like I want to make sure that we're very clear that this goes on both sides. When you're talking about reconciliation, there has to be work done from both people, and there has to be safety created for both people. So a lot of times you'll hear me talk, because I primarily focus on the betrayed partners. We'll talk about how the addict has to provide safety for the betrayed partner. That requires doing the work. It requires going to therapy. It requires getting in groups, having accountability, being honest, not relapsing all the time, like all of these things, right? Communicating, being proactive, demonstrating vulnerability, empathy. Like those are the things that lay this foundation of safety so that the betrayed partner can go, okay, like I'm not going to be finding something new out every 2 weeks. My nervous system isn't going to be destroyed every time we go out in public because you are constantly looking at other people, or telling me once a week that you're relapsing, with normal life activities, or whatever it is in whatever situation, right? And so when there's stability, when there's honesty, and when there's proactive action taken in recovery, that provides tremendous psychological and emotional safety for the partner. And so for me, that is like a fundamental must be in place in order to think, okay, maybe this can work out.
And I'll speak from obviously my side, but I actually think if you're committed, that's actually one of the easier things you can do. So, sometimes it's like, well, are you connected? That's hard, right? But from a basis of safety, if you engage in a particular behavior before, well, then you can, take every action to stop. So here's a good example. If you're looking at pornography, then you very quickly put blockers in and all that sort of thing. So you can't access it. If you have an affair partner, you cut off communication with the affair partner. You do very definitive things that stops access to the behavior. Understanding,
delete the apps.
right? Delete the apps. All of those different things. If you acted out on trips to Vegas and there's 3 more trips to Vegas planned, well, then you cancel those trips, right? You don't try to figure out a way to go take that trip and go, oh, I'll probably be okay. Like those are just, if you're a beach goer and there's something that went up there, well, then for a time you stop with going to the beach, and things like that. So you do some really proactive, definitive steps to start providing that safety.
From the perspective of it going both directions, while the addict is getting into recovery and moving into recovery, I just kind of listed out a bunch of things, and you did too, that provides safety for the betrayed partner. But what does the betrayed partner offer to the addict over time that provides safety through recovery, do you think?
I think it's a support for the human being that it's starting to emerge. And so, for example, if somebody's sad, and I understand early on you might do this, but let's say the addict is coming from therapy and he's like, I'm sad. Maybe you don't say, well, you should be sad because you ruined my life, right? And that's like 6 months in. Maybe you go, let's talk about why you're sad, because part of that emotional piece is coming out there. If you always react to his overture of emotion with a shutdown, or then what he's going to do is he's always going to be activated, and he's going to shut down and not bring it to you. He's going to say, this is not a safe opportunity for me to bring up what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I would say it is an interesting, that's an interesting, it's hard to explain, I think, the right situations for that, because there are times where it's like, yes, it's totally okay to be angry and be like, yeah, I'm so sorry you're experiencing the consequences of your bad behavior.
Yeah.
And so like, it totally is okay for us to be angry and upset. But what I think the red flag that you're kind of talking about is like, if the betrayed partner is not able to see the addict as a human being that has the full spectrum of emotions, that is feeling shame, and you're not able to express empathy on the part of the addict that is wounded, that caused the addiction, that is going to be very difficult, I think. So it doesn't mean that you have to override the betrayal. It doesn't mean you have to override your anger. But I think if there's a piece of you, they can coexist. And so you can have empathy and compassion and still hold very clear boundaries. You can have empathy and compassion and still let them know that you're hurt. You can have all of those things, and they can kind of take turns maybe when they show up and stuff. Yeah. But I think the point is that they both exist.
They do.
So if a betrayed partner is not able to have compassion, maybe even before the addict has compassion on himself, and see that he's a human being, not just somebody who's hurt you.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing. If you're thinking about reconciliation, that's going to be really important.
I agree.
Okay, so there has to be a basis of safety in order to, again, we're thinking about a healthy, non-toxic relationship moving forward. Personal connection. So I'll just use my own personal example that I've shared. Like, when I was married before, it wasn't that hard of a choice for me to say, okay, I'm done, because we didn't really have like this wonderful relational foundation to go back to, that I was like, this is a solid relationship with this person. We have a really good connection. We have all these things in common. We do really well together. We complement each other. It's just this one thing and we need to work on it, right? Like, no, it was more, our relationship is pretty terrible on all levels. And now there's this thing on top of that. And okay, bye. That's kind of, this relationship was very different. We had a lot of things, a lot of personal connection, a lot of overlap, a lot of strengths, a lot of good connection with each other. I liked you as a person. We did really well as friends. All of these things were check off every single box. I think when we went to that one session, we took like some sort of like relationship quiz or whatever. And she's like, I've never seen anyone more compatible than the two. I think she said that at least in terms of that test. She's like, you guys, with the answers that you had, were like checking every. So we knew that was there. We knew that was there. So that for me was kind of like, okay, can I emotionally recover from this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like do you like each other?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you just like each other? I mean, there are there are marriages and sometimes people not fight, whatever, but like, can you take a step back and say, I really like this person, and either yes, they hurt me, or yes, I hurt them, but I like this person, and I want to do what I can to make this right,
And trauma and pain does sometimes change people. And so I think as you go through this process of getting the addict into recovery and getting them stabilized and beginning betrayal recovery and all this kind of stuff, you will kind of come to a point where you're like, I think this is a very important question to answer. Do I like this person? And do I like the person they are becoming? And that goes both ways, because it's really important that both people are doing this work to communicate, to improve communication, to have empathy. And again, it's never suppressing the emotions on either side. Like, there is a time and place for anger, for sadness, for grief, for all of those things. And there is a level and a time and a place for the empathy and the compassion and the support and the growth and all this kind of stuff. And so I do think, sometimes that's it seems so basic, but it's a really important question. Do I like this person? Because if you don't like them, I mean, baseline.
Why go through it?
Why go through it?
Yeah.
It's so hard, even when you're madly in love with the person. It's incredibly hard. If you barely get along or you barely like this person, then it's going to be an uphill battle. Yeah. And then you start getting into the only survival mechanism is actually denial. And so then you're not really engaging in a lot of the healing work anyway. And it's just not going to be, good.
One caveat I'd like to throw out there, and this is for the addicted, is sometimes early on, with the questions and the hurt and the emotional discomfort, it's very normal to go, I don't really like this. So just to make sure, I don't like this situation that we're in versus I don't like this person. They are two different things. So, no one likes to be on the receiving end of questions. Nobody likes to be, nobody
likes to have boundaries set.
Yeah, nobody likes to, grown people. I was actually thinking about this. I run manufacturing facilities, and I had boundaries, and there was times when I was like, I'm a grown man and I've got boundaries. I understood why they were in, but there was a little bit of like my mind couldn't figure it out, right? Like, oh my gosh, but I'm this guy that does all these other like wonderful things and has all this responsibility, and yet I can't write a check. You know what I mean? So but you understand it, right? You understand why those things are in place to give your brain the time to heal and to get to the point where you make. But so I think that's because sometimes people will say, well, I don't like this line of questioning, therefore I don't like this person. And they're not the same thing. So it's important to maintain that distinction.
On topic, off topic, really quickly talk about the idea of boundaries. When someone goes, I think from the addict perspective, I think a boundary is controlling, when in reality, a boundary is about safety for the betrayed partner. Sometimes there are boundaries that sometimes there are boundaries that are set. So you just mentioned writing a check, right? So that could be for the betrayed partner's safety because you have shared finances and you've spent money. And it could also kind of step out over into the type of boundary that is for the accountability for the behavior of the addict himself. That's more where you're kind of participating in when the addict goes, I'm willing to receive help. I need the accountability, right? But that one kind of steps, it has a foot in both pools. I think one for the accountability for the addict and one for the safety of the betrayed partner. Right. But what's your response if an addict goes, I think that boundaries are you just trying to control me, when the betrayed partner is really just trying to make an effort to say that, hey, this is what I'm willing to deal with or not deal with moving forward in the relationship.
Yeah, I think what I would always say is depends on the recency of the boundary like implementation. So here's a good example. There's going to be obviously a lot of boundaries that come out right after discovery.
Let's just say it's like basic boundaries, like getting into sobriety boundaries, right? Like, okay, like go to therapy.
Okay.
Like if you don't work on your healing, I can't keep going forward.
Yeah. And I think if somebody says that person's controlling me, maybe you should take a minute and listen to your spouse, because what's the benefit of going to therapy? Well, it helps grow you. It heals you. It has a tremendous help to it. You know what I mean? What's the benefit of shutting down the internet on your phone if you've been a pornography addict? Well, it blocks you from going and looking at pornography. There's nothing wrong with that. Like we were talking the other day, like I haven't had the internet on my phone in over 3 years. And to be honest with you, I don't miss it. You know what I mean? Like I really don't. Occasionally there's a little thing you're like, whatever. But it's amazing how you can move through life and not have the internet on your phone. You know what I mean? And so there's these things are put in place to help you heal. So I think sometimes what in the strictest of sense on safety, providing safety, they also are coupled to helping you heal as well.
Right.
And so I'll even bring up one that ended up going away. So one that you and I had was it was like no more than 2 drinks, and I had to talk to you about it before, right? So the good news is in the short term was now alcohol wasn't tied to my addiction, but we didn't know. Like even me, I didn't know, like, what's going to happen. So it gave me that distance and clarity to kind of figure out that, like, over time, as you heal, you go, oh, okay. No, it doesn't have an impact on it. Let's revisit that one.
Yeah, it's not really a thing.
Yeah. So, but there's nothing wrong with that, because you needed to understand that I wasn't running around drunk all the time, that I wasn't writing checks like a madman, that like this whole panoply of behavior that you're trying to understand in the first 2 weeks, that you're getting all this detail on. You don't know what patterns I've used, what I've done to lie, what I've done to do anything. And so
I think too, the perspective that the spouse is just trying to be controlling. I mean, I'm sure there are situations where, yes, that's true. And we've even mentioned that in the podcast, where it's like, I have to kind of check myself, because you get into a pattern and, you just want to make sure that you're continually growing and building trust and stuff like that. But generally speaking, I mean, what I see a lot in the betrayed community is difficulty just setting kind of basic boundaries like that. Like, hey, in order to move forward, like, I need you to go to therapy. And if you don't, like, I can't continue with this relationship. Like, that's a super foundational, right? And so when somebody has this idea, or they push back on that, or they have this idea of like, oh, that's just trying to control me, or some sort of negative reaction to that, my question is so much like, how did you get so far from the foundational reality of what a relationship that's monogamous is supposed to be, that you will cheat on your partner and then not do what it takes to help them see that you're never going to do it again? Right. And so I think flipping it back and being like, why does she need that to feel safe? Why does she need for me to go talk to somebody about my behavior? Why does she need for me to be able to explain why? Because the alternative is that you just decided to cheat and you did it on purpose.
Yeah.
That doesn't look good for you.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it doesn't bode well if that's the answer. So she's really looking for you to heal so that she can stay in the relationship. That's like what the idea of boundaries is, like, so totally so that you guys can stay in the relationship. That's the goal. That is the goal.
Well, and healing
nobody, if she doesn't care, she's not going to set a boundary.
Healing takes time. And so does the positive effect of a boundary. So does the analysis of whether a boundary is appropriate over time. All of these things take time. And I think what happens is people will say, and you were talking about this on like the betrayed side too, I'm only going to go to therapy until we get through the therapeutic disclosure. You don't resolve that kind of a, like, if you don't think it's that big of a deal, then why even go through disclosure? You know what I mean? Like, don't go through any of that hard stuff. Like, just go ahead and be like, boop, healed, flip the switch, turn on Seinfeld reruns and move on with your life, you know?
That was a good little tangent. Okay, so when to fight, we have the basis of safety. We talked a lot about that. Personal connection. Do you like your spouse, basically? So the third one is social and familial stability, right? It's a big consideration for people when they have young children or when they have kids in general, or what does their family look like and how do they have businesses together? Like, what is the social and familial situation, right? And so it's a huge consideration. And so, let's say you've built like this long, happy life. You have this personal connection with each other. You have several kids together. In general, your life is like, 8 out of 10. It's great. It's going well. You're happy together. You've created something beautiful and it's worth fighting for. And then this thing comes up that you didn't know about, and the addict is willing to take responsibility and do the work, then yeah, absolutely. I think that's worth at least seeing it out, seeing it through to see if, can you heal enough to make it happen? Can he heal enough to make it happen? And so those considerations certainly come in. I think kids is one of those things that people will bring up a lot, for sure, as like this huge thing. And I don't, I don't want to like blanket statement. They're always a consideration, always, 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 always. And they were like when we were together too. Keegan was older, but he was still in the house. And my immediate thought was something around those lines. Within like 3 days, I was like, I don't care what happens with you and me. I'm staying in the house until he graduates. Like that was immediately like, So I get that, like, that's a huge consideration. And it certainly adds a layer of, hey, can we see if we can work this out? Right? Can we see if we can work this out? So definitely a consideration there.
One thing,
not the end all be all though.
Yeah. One thing I could say on kids is, having been through a divorce, with Keegan as a young child, kids can sense anger and a lot of deep emotions. They can sense those. And if you're living in an environment where the emotions are deep and the talk about lack of safety, and there's arguing and there's constant strife and all of these different things, over time, right? I don't want to say within a 2-week period, right? It's over time. Maybe that's not the reason. Maybe that's not the reason to stay together. If you two believe you can co-parent effectively, let's say going through a split up situation, a divorce situation, and be there and present for the kids, because a lot of parents do it, and then both parents are happy and stuff like that. So it's just, you have to evaluate your own personal situation and understand what that means, and things like that, because it's like, oh, we'll stay together at all costs. Well, the cost could be pretty significant, you know what I mean? Versus like, hey, can we both show up for the child, even though we're divorced, in the most positive, safe way possible, and the emotion level comes down, and each environment that the child spends time in is positive, and so those kinds of things.
Definitely. Okay, so the last point and this is not an exhaustive list, so I'm sure somebody might be listening like, wait, because you didn't mention. Yeah. So the last thing we're going to talk about right now about when to fight for your marriage is, and this almost sums up everything, I feel like, is when you have two people, both of you are willing to engage in the work it takes. Both are willing to learn about the other. So the addict learns about betrayal. The betrayed partner learns about addiction. You both learn how to communicate more effectively. You both empathize with the other partner. You both feel safe holding the other person's emotions and sharing your difficult emotions. You both work through your own wounding and your own pain and your own triggers and your own traumas, and you keep growing individually and together. And I honestly think that's almost like the only point we need here, because I really believe this. It takes two people to make a marriage work. It only takes one to make it fail.
Yeah.
Total end of the sentence, period. Like, it's not, because people are always like, well, it takes two to tango. No. One person can destroy a relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
It absolutely can. But in order for it to work and be healthy, it definitely takes two.
Yeah.
It absolutely takes two.
Well, and the other part, and I've talked to a lot of people. There was an interesting week this last week with a lot of guys in the group and stuff like that. There's a lot of things going on, and through each of those conversations, I was always like, hey, you're meaningful. You have worth. You have, like, everybody has worth, and everybody's worth going through the healing journey, and everybody is we all deserve to live the most optimal version of ourselves. And sometimes that takes time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I find myself kind of encouraging people to do this all the time, which is like, have a high standard. How many times do we as human beings settle for something in life?
Right.
And then instead of continual growth and continual improvement and continual deepening of authenticity and values and alignment with who we are and with our partner in our life, we settle for something that's very uncomfortable, and that only gets more uncomfortable over time. That doesn't get, you don't learn to really tolerate that as much as it eventually explodes at some point. And so I never encourage people to settle through the recovery process on either side. I mean, the idea is that if you're going to go through this and you're going to go through the horrible pain of reconciliation, it's horrible. I mean, there's a lot of beauty to it too, and we've talked about that, but it is hard. It's really, 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 really hard. If you're going to do that, the vision of the outcome had better be great. You know what I mean? Like, we move towards this goal, and what does that look like? And that, to me, should never be a low bar.
Right.
Like, that should never just be like, well, we're functioning in the same house together, barely tolerating each other, and we've gone through all this hard work. It's like, well, what's the point at that point? You know what I mean? So, no, the goal is that you have two people that really like want to move towards each other, that want to move forward in life, that are, want to be healthy. That is when I think it's totally worth fighting for, is when you have two people that are engaged. All right. So then when do you let it go? Let it go. Let it go.
The opposite of all those other things.
Yeah. Well, the number one thing I think I'm going to say here is, at any point at which you determine that the scale is weighted more heavily on emotional or psychological or physical distress, and it's impacting your long-term physical, emotional, or mental health. That is, I think, the point at which it's when beyond okay to say, I can't do this anymore. And I see this because there's so many betrayed partners out there that they want so badly, particularly when they understand addiction. They're like, okay, I get it. I understand addiction. I want to give him a chance. And they do all the things, and they give him all the chances, and they set all the boundaries, and then he ignores them, and then he doesn't go to therapy, and then he gaslights, and he blames, and he verbally abuses, and he pushes back, and he lies, and he manipulates, and all this kind of stuff. And they just try harder. They try harder. They try to set a different boundary. They try to find the counselor. They try to do this. They try to do that. And you see this over time. Like, everyone has a breaking point. And there are a lot of people out there that will really truly wait until they hit that point instead of catching it before. And when I say breaking point, you could have a psychological break, you could have a physical break, it could be an emotional break where you just like one day you're like, you know what, I'm done. It could be any sort of thing. But what I see is that it really, on women, I think it takes a huge physical toll. And so what you may feel is that you're emotionally and psychologically capable of handling all this stress. But at the same time that you're handling all of this and you're, quote unquote, tolerating it, your physical body keeps getting more tired and keeps breaking down. And all of a sudden you have all these symptoms. Maybe you're getting headaches. Maybe your periods hurt more. Maybe your periods are irregular or missed or skipping or whatever. Maybe you're getting migraines. Maybe you're extremely fatigued. Maybe you have more joint pain. Maybe you have a lot of diarrhea. Like, maybe you have acid reflux, maybe you have a different diagnosis that has now come up. There's a lot of stuff. And one of the most common is just extreme levels of anxiety or, depression, right? Those are very, 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 very common. And I really don't think those are things to ignore or to say, it's okay that I feel this bad all the time. It's not, and so always going back, to the foundation of healing, your nervous system cannot recover unless it feels safe. And so if you're constantly in an environment where someone is pushing back on things that you need in order to feel safe, then your brain and your nervous system are going to live in a state of perpetual freaking out. And over time, that takes up so much energy from your body. And there is a point at which everybody has a limit. And so my encouragement is not to wait until you get to that point, because then that's really gone on a long time.
I think as you're talking, I'm thinking about this one example. It's like if you don't have to relapse, but sometimes addicts relapse. And so, here would be a good example of where the red flag should really go up. Let's say that the addict had shut things down, but there was a loophole, right? And that he didn't know about, but all of a sudden it happened. He got in there and he relapsed. Comes to you, says, "Hey, I relapsed," but is unwilling to take the next step to lock that down. "Oh no, I need that for work," or "I need this," or "I can't, I can't lock that down," or whatever. Versus like, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I wasn't expecting this. It hit me at a weird time. These are the steps I'm going to take."
Being proactive.
Yeah, being proactive. So I think once again, you don't have to relapse. But sometimes people do. And so what's the reaction when the relapse happens? Because that's like another violation of safety.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what we're talking about here is, and it's interesting, when we started getting into this, we started looking into all of the terminology, right? And this type of behavior is abusive. And I think a lot of individuals have a difficult time absorbing that language. Nobody wants to be labeled an abuser. I completely understand that. And a lot of women don't want to label their spouses as abusers. And I totally get that. The reality is, if someone is gaslighting you, blaming you, not taking responsibility, putting you down, pushing back on your boundaries over and over and over and over, if someone is lying to you regularly, if they're impacting your mental and emotional and psychological health, they are being abusive. They don't have to hit you to be abusive. They don't even have to verbally abuse you to be abusive. They could just be a chronic liar. That is abusive because it hurts you and it triggers your nervous system. They know it's wrong. They do it anyway. They see the impact it has on you. You get more and more distressed and they keep doing it. That's abusive. That's what that looks like. So I think sometimes in our culture and society, we have this idea of like, well, unless somebody is physically hurting me, I should be able to tolerate it. And it's like, no, what is marriage supposed to actually be? Not that.
Yes. Well put.
But it's like what happens in marriage, I think a lot of times in relationships and in life is it's the frog in the boiling pot scenario. I can tolerate this, it's not that bad. And then the temperature goes up. Okay, well, I can tolerate this, it's not so bad. Okay, and then the temperature goes up. Well, and we do that over and over and over and over again. And the question you have to ask yourself is, will you be the frog that jumps out, or will you be the frog that stays in? And I don't want anyone to be the frog that stays in, that just tolerates things that they don't need to tolerate. You deserve more. You are a human being on both sides of the equation that deserves love, you are worthy, you are enough, exactly who you are. And like we said in the first section, in order to fight for a marriage, it takes two people that are willing. So the other point with this one is when to let go is, if there's only one of you that's doing the work, if there's only one partner that is actively trying to heal from the pain of addiction and betrayal, that sometimes, this is where I'm going to put the little tiny asterisk, the little caveat, sometimes that's temporary. And then, like, for example, the addict kind of pushes back because they're in addict brain and they resist a little bit, and then they're like, okay, you're right. And then they jump in and everything's fine. But when this becomes a recurring pattern, you've identified the pattern, your emotional health is going down the tube, and you've noticed that like this is not just like a 2-month thing. This is like, he's not getting help, right? Or even the other way, like the addict is like checking off all the boxes, but the betrayed partner is staying in bitterness or anger or pain or whatever, and refuses to see help, right? Like it could go either way. Either way, if there's only one partner that's truly invested in the healing, long term, that's going to be incredibly devastating for the actual health of the relationship. It's not going to work. The person that is not engaging in healing is going to drain the relationship, and they're draining themselves, honestly, because it's so exhausting to live in that state. It's so exhausting to live in that state. So a couple questions you could ask yourself kind of when you are in this phase, because decisions are hard, right? And again, so I'm not saying listen to this podcast that we're talking about big major brushstrokes and then make a decision about your life. Please be talking to somebody one-on-one. If you're a betrayed partner, I would love to work with you. If you're an addict, please see a CSAT. There's never a situation where we're going to encourage people not to get personalized help.
I mean, and once again, remember, it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. So, even when you're in a position of safety, the conversations are still going to be hard, and holidays are going to be hard. We've talked a lot about a lot of those things through the year. But just remember it's going to take time, but are you seeing patterns shift? If you're a betrayed spouse, are you seeing patterns shift? You go, oh, okay.
I tell this to, betrayed partners all the time. It's like, you're not even necessarily looking for perfection. All these people want is to see a trajectory of healing. They want to see progress. Nobody expects you to wake up one day and be perfect when you've had 20 years of addiction patterns in your history. But we do want to see that you're taking it seriously. We do want to see that you're being honest about it. We do want to see that you care that it's devastated our lives. We do want to see that you're going to therapy and learning about emotions and why it happened, right? Mm-hmm. So nobody expects anybody to be perfect. And same thing on the betrayed side, right? Like we've talked about this too, and all the mistakes that we can all make as we navigate the minefield, right? But are we working through it? Are we committed? Are we committed to trying again? Do we apologize to each other when we do have those? So notice through this episode, I probably shouldn't even bring this up. We can delete this if you don't like it. But notice through this episode, what we did not say is when to fight for your marriage. If you are two Christian people who believe that,
no.
right? Mm. Or when to let go. If you are a Christian, you're not allowed to let go because divorce is evil. We didn't say that, okay? Because it's not true, okay? God wants you to have a healthy relationship. And that's a whole other episode about how faith plays into these.
Well, that took a turn.
Well, I was thinking all of a sudden about the Harrison Butker thing and anyway, Christianity and anyway. So, but no, we could have totally gone down that route, right? Because we are Christians, but that's not what we're talking about. Okay, we can talk about that if you guys want us to, but no, I think too often people go, well, I'm a Christian, I have to stay. Again, kind of going into that physical abuse thing, being like, well, he's not hitting me, or he didn't have a physical affair. It's quote unquote just pornography or whatever. Nope. God wants, nope. Mm-hmm. God, if you read the Bible, Jesus is always, supporting the victims. He is always promoting taking personal responsibility, weeding out the evil in your life. And he's not telling you to just sit there and allow someone to psychologically or emotionally abuse you over and over and over and over again. And so I think there's a lot more freedom than people sometimes read into that. But again, that's another episode. Sorry to go off topic there. So some questions, again, going back to, we always encourage you to talk to someone individually, but some questions, if you're listening to this episode and you're going, well, okay, you got me thinking, but what do I do? Again, talk to someone one-on-one, but here's some questions you can ask is, who do you want to be? Not who you are or who you were like 5 years ago, although sometimes that can be a helpful question. If there's a time in your life where you felt very confident and empowered and, self-confident and just positive and all this kind of stuff, go back to that time and be like, who was that person, right? And compare it to who you are right now. But more than that, I want you to think out, who's the type of person you want to be? Who do you want to be? Visualize that person. What does that person think? What do they say? How do they act? What kind of boundaries do they set? Who do they spend time with? And this is like, you could think of it as your higher self. You could think of it as the best version of you. You could think of it as the future version of you. And it doesn't have to be any version of you that you've been yet. That's the whole point of learning and growing and setting a vision, right? Is getting really clear on who is it that I want to be. And I think that's going to help you, because if you're not that person right now, we want to get clear on who that is so we can move towards that goal. And the other question I want you to ask yourself is, if you are in this exact same scenario in 5 years with your partner, whatever it is, wherever you're at, if it is either on the same trajectory as it is right now, or it stays exactly the same in 5 years, how are you going to feel about that? Are you going to be okay with that? And if the answer is no, then that is a very clear indication that maybe there's a very clear boundary that needs to be set with a timeline. Maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had or a decision to be made. And then the last thing is, what do you think is actually a healthy relationship? What does that look like? What does that entail? And I encourage my clients to like literally dream when I give them like this question. Like, go back to when you were 15 and think about Prince Charming. What are his character qualities? Like, maybe throw a little bit of reality in there now that you're an adult. Like, what does it look like? Like, what in your perfect relationship, what are the characteristics of the person that you would be with, and what is the dynamic of the relationship between the two of you? How do you talk to each other? How do you engage? What type of activities do you do? Like, what does your life look like? How do you feel when you're in that relationship? All of those things. When you get clear on those 3 questions, it's going to be much more clear if this is something that is going to be worth the effort of fighting for the marriage moving forward, or if it's something that maybe some really difficult conversations need to be had about what you're willing to deal with long term.
And, once again, I keep saying this, but for the addict, you're going to change. Your thought patterns are going to change as you heal. Your ability to see things is going to clarify as you go through the healing process. So don't be too hasty in these things. Really give it time. It's really going to be, because you got to remember, your addiction came because you couldn't deal with hard things. So when now all of a sudden you're going through something really, really hard, and it's going to be very uncomfortable. So the healed version of you can handle these things and can see people's hurt and can really lean into providing a solid basis for people. And so understand that you're not there yet early on, that you will get there if you keep going. And don't be afraid to give yourself a little bit of patience, even if you're in the thick of it at times.
Well, and what you just said on the addict side is why it's often recommended for the betrayed partner, if they're interested in reconciliation, to give it like 6 months to a year of observing, like, okay, are they going to get into therapy? Are you going to see this progress? Are you going to see the healing trajectory? Is safety going to be provided? Because again, that doesn't, even with the best case scenario, it doesn't happen overnight. Like, our first 6 months were bumpy, at least.
They were.
But I knew, like, you were going to therapy every single week. You were going to group every single week. Like, I could tell, I could very, very, very clearly see you were making the effort. Like, that was super, super obvious right away. But yeah, so I think to your point, like, to the addict, like, it does take time. So buckle up, because it's going to be a multi-year process. And for the betrayed partner, if you are interested in reconciliation, watch him in that process. That's going to give you all the information you need to then tap into yourself and be like, okay, is this something that, with help, with support, because I don't think we can really do this alone, but with help and with support and with, someone to guide me through this process, watching him go through this the way he is this something I'm going to be able to do? And that will give you some more information. All right. This is a hot topic. This is a lot. I'm sure there were probably 20 other points we could have talked about on either side. But we hope this was encouraging and maybe thought-provoking. We would love to hear your thoughts on this. And otherwise, we will see you. Yes. So
I have a quick question. When we started the podcast, you were going to nod off because you were low energy. How do you feel now? Because my impression is you've got energy.
Yeah. Anytime you talk about things I'm passionate about, and if we want to do a second episode right now talking about Christianity and church and divorce, we could just roll right into that if you'd like.
I need to nod off.
Okay, I'll get riled up for that one though. All right, yeah, yep. No, I'm doing good. Thank you. All right, everyone. We will see you next week.
Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.